I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the future for abortion rights advocates. You won't hear much about pro-choice women or men this political season. Advocates are rejecting the once prevalent label pro-choice, claiming it no longer represents the range of women's health and economic issues. They also need to appeal to a new generation of young women who eschew labels and are not single-issue voters. Don't expect a new catchphrase anytime soon. Former pro-choice advocates say abortion and birth control issues are more complex than that. Anti-abortion advocates call the end of pro-choice a victory. So, Congresswoman Norton, is the term pro-choice passé?
You know, Bonnie, there's no such thing as a permanent slogan. Ask the advertisers. Language must appeal to the generation to which it is addressed.
I think what's become passé is the idea that abortion at any time for any reason is an okay thing. I think most Americans are increasingly uncomfortable with that, and you're seeing that play out at the voter box and in the states.
Well, I think as this movement has watched, the issues really hit home economically and with regard to all kinds of women's health, contraception in particular, that yes, it's a bit passé.
Well, and interestingly, millennials identify themselves as both pro-choice and pro-life. And so what I think is happening here is that they're moving beyond just some of these gender politics to more full-force issues like economics, as you referred to.
I can see you're a longtime activist in the pro-choice movement and, you know, very involved in it. I can see dropping the term, but I really was kind of confused that they didn't come up with another term, because what are you... You know, you kind of need a little slogan to I'm this or I'm that, right?
Well, you know, I think what's happened is, and, you know, I was on the board of NARAL about 7 years ago in Virginia. And when we had legislators in Virginia trying to take birth control away from women in Virginia, suddenly everybody who called us were, you know, panicked about birth control. And so what happened was the field became much wider. We were not myopically concerned about, you know, just the issue of choice. It just broadened, and it was sort of a reaction. Our language changed as a reaction to what was happening out in the political realm.
Well, but why wasn't the conversation, okay, there's so much more going on here, so what are we going to change what we are to, like just pro-woman? Let's try taking that.
And that could happen ultimately. In fact, when I was involved with NARAL, they changed their name from the long National Abortion Rights to Pro-Choice NARAL. Because at that point, pro-choice, when they did their study 10 years ago, was something that people could relate to. Now, I do think it's a broader range of issues. You take away somebody's birth control, well, that's an economic issue for a lot of families. When 99% of Americans have used contraception at some point in their lives to control the size of their family, this is a bigger issue than just a choice issue.
Well, and I would say, I mean, it's a political issue. Let's be clear. If something's working, usually people don't decide we need to change it. And the reason I think you're seeing a change here is because they've realized pro-choice, as much as that's attached to people thinking they're more pro-abortion, is not a good space to be in the larger political spectrum anymore. There are other battles like birth control that they think are more winnable, so let's move there. But I really do think, well, I think it's a victory for the pro-life side if you want to say, does this mean the country has moved more towards placing restrictions on certain abortion laws? Yeah, I mean, I think that's just fact-based, it's evidence. But I think one of the reasons they're moving is because they've realized it's no longer a great slogan at the ballot box, and that's why you make changes in politics.
And remember, pro-choice came out of a period when there was no choice. And now that has changed, not entirely, I must say. Courts just had to step in Mississippi to keep the last abortion clinic from going out of existence. But I have never understood, and by the way, it was happenstance. Yeah. You're not pro-gun or pro-not-gun, so, you know, pro isn't necessary. Yeah. Reproductive health really struck me as important, and maybe that's because I read history. And history tells us that only in the 20th century did women begin to live longer than men. And the reason was because of contraception and abortion.
And safer births, right? Because a lot of women used to die.
Safer births, all. In other words, the health notion is so broad and so much related to your very being as a woman that it has always seemed to me to be about your own personal health.
But do you actually think that by dropping the slogan they'll get more women on board,
I
more
don't think
young
that's the point.
women?
I just think nobody wants to have a passé slogan.
And the other thing is, choice to me, when you really think about it, it frames this as something that is a choice. And frankly, if you don't have any money, there's no choice for you anyway. I never thought it was a very good name because it discounted a whole lot of women who are in major trouble if they cannot control their reproductive situation.
And can you think of a term that would include them?
I really can't, because now, you know, when we have politicians, you know, trying to redefine rape, when we have them prescribing these invasive reproductive health procedures from legislative chambers, and you have, I mean, all these unbelievable issues are not really under one umbrella. I can't think of one phrase or one word. The idea of preserving reproductive health is probably the best one.
So, you know, as a millennial, I understand that young people, they kind of see these issues as having moved on, and that's why you're not seeing them as active on a lot of these issues. Pew did a study on millennials, their perception of gay marriage and of race and of abortion rights, and they see themselves, as I mentioned earlier, they see themselves as pro-life, but they also see themselves as, you know, supporting abortion because it's a done deal to many of them. But I think what's more important,
well, what would wake them up to?
Well,
I mean,
what's more
to
important?
See that it's really very fluid, and that it's based on one Supreme Court decision under a Supreme Court that was very different from the one today. And if it were before the court today, there probably would not be nationalized choice, if you will.
I think it's interesting what is going to wake them up, and I really think it goes back to the economic issues. I mean, it's less, excuse me, if I have money to pay for my my abortion, and it's more, do I have a job right now? Well, and I think with unemployment at 15% for millennials, I think they're much more worried about, can I get off my parents' couch, than they are about a lot of these reproductive issues. And I think that's a hard thing.
Yeah, and that's just a reality.
That doesn't mean that they're not, that the young women are going to stop having sex, and it doesn't mean that they're going to be there aren't going to be any more.
But all these young women have access, more of them have access to contraception and birth control today than ever in the history of this country. So, I mean, I think the reality is the pressure for most of them right now is, can I get a job? How am I paying off my student loans? And let's be realistic. People worry about what's most important to them at that moment.
Yeah, but they're taking for granted the 1973 decision. And the moment that really gets to be in jeopardy, you'll see them jump to the fore, because they are the women who are of childbearing age.
All right.